name's Lindsay. I'm from Kent, Ohio, and I'm a grateful believer that struggles with mental health and addiction.
Lindsay, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come out to our place here in Portage County. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your day.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you. So let's start at the beginning. Can you share about your childhood? So your family relationships, your socioeconomic background, any trauma that you experienced, things like that.
Yeah, so my family was called the Huxtables, back in the 80s, the perfect family kind of thing, but really deep down, there were so many issues. My dad, I know now being in recovery, he's struggling with stuff in life, and my mom had a lot of denial about things. So it was very chaotic sometimes at home. But, I always tried to keep the peace. I was the oldest. My brother is only 9 months and one day younger than me. So there was a lot of jealousy, I think, rivalry between us. But I had good grades. I played like 8 instruments growing up. I was an overachiever. So my family life on the outside looked perfect. And then inside it was very, very awful. My dad, I don't even know I really haven't even processed a lot of my childhood trauma yet. But I know it affects my adult life now. So I really am working hard at trying to go back and put pieces together. So, going on in life, I was a floater, I guess you could say, because I just never could figure out my identity and be comfortable in my own skin. I think my mental health really didn't come out until my parents got divorced when I was about 12. So that's when things maybe started to brew. But back in the 80s, you just didn't talk about that kind of stuff, especially in Black families. You just pushed through and that was that. So I kind of just was the emotional one in the family, And so I've learned to stuff and I learned to be very private about my emotions. I think when I went to Bowling Green for my freshman year, I was in manic by then. And that was the best year of my life. I hate to say, I was the life of the party. I remember, because it was just a new place. People didn't know who I was, so I could be anybody I wanted to be, So I really came out of my shell. I was very, I had never had a boyfriend in high school. So, boys were starting to be very interested in me. So, promiscuity or whatever, just all those things that I was taught not to do, I went ahead and did. But very quickly I crashed. I remember the first time I got rejected by a guy. That was the first night I cut. And I just remember when I did that, the amount of emotions that was released from that was the pivotal point in my mental health. Yeah, I can recall that very vividly.
Can you share a little bit about your first use and what did it do for you?
If I can remember. My first use, I know, so my son I was a late bloomer. I call myself a late bloomer. My son was probably about 2-3 years old. So I was about 25, 26. I met a gentleman through a woman at work who was very jealous of me. But she knew I was lonely. She knew I was broken. But she also knew this guy was kind of bad news. I had a heart, so he was homeless, decided, hey, come on, stay with me. Never met him, but said, hey, come stay with me and my son. And he introduced me to this world of crack. And the first time I did that, it was like the first time I cut. All of my thoughts, all of my emotions, all of the things that I struggled with and just had kept way down disappeared. And it was something that I wanted to do over and over again because it wasn't so much the using as the feelings were gone. I was able to be numb. I was able to function because now looking back, I have ADHD. So a stimulant, I was like, wait a minute, this is what the world looks like. So I was very functional. I would go to work, I would go to school, I would take care of my son. Nobody in my life knew that I partied all night long and then would show up the next morning and do what I needed to do. I did that for 10 years. 10 years, nobody knew I used to. So, so yeah, it just allowed me to function. And I love that feeling. I'll be honest, even now, there's days where I'm like, it's not that I glorify it, but it's like, it would be nice to be able to function without emotions today, you know? And so, of course, you find other ways of doing that, Netflix, shopping, but yeah, that feeling of not being me was gone.
So at what point did you recognize I have a problem?
Ironically, I didn't realize I had a problem with addiction until I was forced to kind of go into a recovery housing. My son was maybe about 10 now, and my mom and stepdad had threatened to take him from me, but they didn't know why. They just knew things were always chaotic for me. I couldn't pay my rent, my cars were always stolen, things like that. So I told them it was because of mental health. I had to go to treatment because my mental health was about to go off the rails, and if I didn't get treatment now, it was going to be awful. And so they bought that, and I was able to go to the Horizon House. And but when I got there, maybe about the first meeting we went to AA, because I had never been to AA, none of those meetings, I heard someone's lead, and it was talking about how you have to be true to yourself in recovery, and you're never going to heal if you're not true. So that's when it kind of hit me like, oh, I need to be honest. Like, I'm not just an occasional user. Like, I've got a problem. If I'm here, yeah, mental health can get you here too, but my using got me there. And so I wrote a letter to my mom and told her the truth about the 10 years. And it was the worst thing I feel in our relationship, but in the end, it's brought us back together. But yeah, she didn't talk to me about a month into the whole treatment thing because of that.
So what kind of support helped you the most in your early recovery?
Early recovery, I think being in treatment helped in the beginning. I went to the Horizon House. The typical stay, I think, was 90 days. I ended up staying 120, although I got kicked out like 4 days before graduation. So, but meeting women there, learning that there's programs out there, AA, NA, there's so many groups to feel like you belong. And that's what I think is the biggest support for me in recovery, is knowing that I belong somewhere. I don't have to be like everybody in that group, but I can belong to a group. And so that has helped me the most in my recovery, because I'm definitely my own beat and I'm okay with that. But I want to belong to a band, if that makes sense. So yeah.
So let's talk about what your recovery looks like today.
Okay. My recovery today it's unique. It's I can't imagine my life without recovery. And I love that recovery isn't defined, and that you can make it your own. And I love blowing people's minds about being in recovery. Some people are so surprised that, I've struggled with drugs and alcohol and mental health, because I make it look easy. But really it isn't. It's just the amount of work that I've put in. I love self-discovery. I love self-awareness. So any tool that I can use in recovery, I will find it, and then I love sharing it.
Can you share any stigma that you faced during your recovery from family, friends, community, employment, or healthcare?
Yeah, so in the very beginning, when everyone found out that I was using, that stigma, and I still have it. I know I do. You can tell sometimes when I'm not doing like what they expect me to do. They're thinking, oh no, is she doing that again? So they kind of get, I don't distant. But, you know, you learn very quickly who you can tell, who you can't. I love how doctors suddenly think that because you're in pain, you're drug seeking. Um, that was never even my thing. So that stigma I fight against a lot now. Um, but I'm honest with them. I'm open and honest. I'm like, hey, I struggled with this. It's been years, but you need to know as far as my care, this is how it goes. So I'm honest with my doctors, my family. I just had to put in the working, living amends in order to beat that stigma.
So what do you do today to maintain your mental, physical, and spiritual health?
I am in a holistic program. So if my physical's off, all of the other ones are off, or my spiritual. So for me, it's just finding what works on a consistent basis. When I wake up, there's mornings where my body is not feeling great physically. So I have to take time to stop. I pray, I meditate, I just feel the emotions some days. And if I allow myself to do that, then the rest of the day is great. If I don't, I'm going to have a horrible day. So I've just learned that physically, if I'm not feeling good, take a moment, give yourself a break, rest. Spiritually, if I'm not, feeling it, meditate, pray, read the Bible, call a friend, something to kind of get me back in alignment with that. Emotionally, I'm learning it's okay to cry. It's okay to cry in public. It's okay to just be, I call it in the blue, because your body's going to force itself into those things if you don't allow it. So, I just let it hit me. And then once it passes, I'm ready to go. Let's get this party started, kind of thing. So, yeah.
So what have you learned about yourself from your addiction and recovery?
Well, according to other people, no, I'm learning to adapt and embrace these thoughts. I'm resilient. I know I'm very resilient. I know I'm strong, and I'm very resourceful. And I'm unique and special. I know everybody's special, but really, I'm happy that I'm different from other people. And I never liked that about myself. And so I'm loving myself now. It's a nice feeling to be able to look in the mirror and not cry. I look and I smile and I'm like, you know what? You've got some issues still, but that's okay. We're working on them.
I want you to share some inspiration and hope for those who are still struggling with mental health and substance use disorders.
Some inspiration and hope. It's okay to struggle. It's okay to not be like everyone else. The important thing is, though, to find what works for you. And not worry about if it works for someone else. I think the main thing for me was I've got to do what's best for me. And it may not look like what everyone else is doing, but that's okay. If I'm functioning, if I'm happy, if I'm feeling better than I did the day before, then that's all that matters. And there's going to be rough times. There's always rough times. But it's how you pull yourself out of those rough times that is the motivating factor sometimes too. So.
Lindsay, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us here at Open United Recovery Place in Ravenna, Ohio. And you were sharing some inspiration and hope for those who need it most. Your story will help to spread awareness, humanize addiction, end stigma, and inspire hope one story at a time. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.